Welcome to the Book Blast podcast, which showcases a selection of the best writing from around the world published by small presses and imprints at the majors who specialise in translation. Today I'm delighted to be able to be interviewing the internationally best-selling French Algerian novelist Faïza Guène and her translator Sarah Ardizzone. Faïza, your first novel, Kiffe, demain, published in England under the title Just Like Tomorrow, sold over 400,000 copies when it came out and has been translated into 26 different languages. You were 19. What was your idea of a writer's life back then?
Honestly, I had no idea of what's a writer's life, and the idea of becoming a writer didn't even, hit my mind a second. So, a happy accident for me to become a writer. I grew up in a area where we don't even had the idea of different ways to go out. So for me, a writer was a very old person, white person, a rich person. So not me.
For how long had you been writing? Was your family supportive of your storytelling? Because you started writing at quite an early age, didn't you?
I was a very young child when I started to write. It was for me like, a hobby. So they were used to see me with a pen and write things. And sometimes my mother put these stories in the trash. It was not a serious thing. It was like a child who is drawing or, making puzzles. And after, when I was a teenager, at the age of 13, I took part in a workshop in my area with a great French teacher. And we started to write some pieces of scenario, of small text for short movies, in the way not professional, but it was my first experience of collective writing, and that was a moment where my parents, especially my mother, took part in this work. She played with me in my short movies, and I think she realized at this time that it was something that was important to me. So my first experience was to write some stories for short movies. And after that, I started to write the first novel, Kiffe, demain, in this workshop. But I couldn't imagine that it will become a novel, a real novel. Fabulous man was Boris Seguin. So he was a teacher of a French class in the school of this area where I was studying at this time. He has not just with me a sense of how to make these students more confident about themselves, about the perception of themselves. And this workshop, it was for us a way to write and express ourselves about what were our lives. Very different from what we could see at this time in French television, in medias. And it was really, I don't know how to say it, a way to feel free, to expose our vision. So Boris, it was, he became the friend with the years, and he seen how he can push me to go on with this writing. I think the main difference with this teacher, especially, was that he hadn't condescendance, mépris. He wasn't patronizing, he wasn't in this way, he wasn't paternalist with us. He truly respects our culture and our visions, and treat us as young adults and not some poor young people he had to save. And I think it was very, very important to us.
Your novels tell the stories of normal people living in urban tower block estates surrounding cities like Paris, Lyon and Marseille. They struggle with racism, cultural hybridity and how to make a living in the face of poverty and unemployment. People may share a history but maintain very different perspectives. With the complicated history of France and Algeria in mind, has the Black Lives Matter movement helped to illuminate and support alternative representations challenging the official narrative of historical events?
For these last years with these new voices coming up, talking about what is the life of immigration descendant from this history of colonization, particularly in France, we finally have a sort of legitimacy to talk about these things and to write about it. And maybe we can finally talk about this without this accusation of being a victim, you know? This worldwide movement around Black Lives Matter, etc., it was, we can, take part of something more global that specific French problematics about immigration. Like if we can took seriously our perspectives. I don't know if I am clear. We have also this thing in France, like for example with the problematics about les violences policières. And last year with George Floyd death, I observed something here. It's we can freely talk about racism, violence with police when it happens in United States or in United Kingdom, but in France we have a different perspective. They have an ability to talk about and to critique, the American system, for example, and to, I don't know if the word exists, but diabolizing.
Making them seem like devils, like Satan, and the word is vilifying and villainizing.
Yeah, villainizing. So in France we have this ability to villainizing the American system and to say how racism is so bad outside, and a real difficulty to accept that in our country, here in France, we have systemic racism, very powerful.
Sarah, you have translated Gaël Faye, Timothée de Fontbelle, Daniel Pennac and, exceptionally, Alain Maboncou's Black Bazaar. Your translation of Faïza Guène's debut novel, Just Like Tomorrow, won the Scott Moncrieff Prize for Translation in 2007. You went on to translate her novels Dreams from the Ends, Barbelto and others, and now Men Don't Cry. What was your working process like? How involved was Faïza?
So what you're asking me, Georgia, is what's my relationship, in a sense, been with Faïza over 16 years? And funnily enough, we had a correspondence just the other day, and I brought up the article that I wrote for The Guardian and that was published in 2006. And that was the very first time that I met Faïza. I interviewed her. And I had, by that stage, translated Just Like Tomorrow. And I had collaborated very closely with young bilingual slang experts in Brixton, the area of London where I live. So a lot of collaboration had occurred in terms of finding equivalents for how all the colour and dynamic and rhythm and liveliness and fun and joy and frustration within Faïza's language, how that was going to work in English. But I hadn't yet had the encounter with her. And it was a really funny moment. I can still remember it vividly. And we met in a cafe, which was where Faïza chose to meet journalists. And we were sort of booked in for an hour together, I think. And it was just this very uncanny encounter because I had been inside Faïza's head for months and months in this book that I just adored, that the very first time I read, I forgot to get off the bus and it went right to the end of the line because I was reading it with such joy. And I had so many questions for her, and questions that could still apply back to the book because I think it was being edited at the time, so it was great. I could feed in all of that. And I remember Faïza looking at me quite quizzically and sort of saying, you know, no one's asked me a question about that before. And it was almost sort of like, you know, like it was an analysis session or something. And it was very friendly. It was very fascinating. It was very exciting. But because Faïza this was her first novel and such an important moment for her, and for me it was a love affair. It was this book that I had just adored being involved in, and so I had so many questions, and that was 16 years ago. And now we've been on a real journey, and we're 6 books in, and you know, just last night I was sending Faïza all sorts of questions for Discretion, which is the novel of Faïza's that I'm translating at the moment. And so the questions come much earlier, the impact on the English happens much earlier, we're in dialogue about a lot. For some commissions, they've come through English sources. So Faïza's written them for an English market in mind for some pieces that she's written. So it's about how we've grown and responded and evolved and kept having fun and kept interrogating each other and where we stand and what the relationship means over that time.
Faïza, in your latest novel, Men Don't Cry, we witness the ups and downs of a family through the eyes of Mourad, born in Nice to Algerian parents. There is mistrust of the receiving culture on the part of the parents and ambivalence with regards to the homeland on the part of the younger generation, Dunya, Mina and Mourad, who end up following very different paths. How were these characters developed?
For Men Don't Cry, my first idea was to explore this question of how you can be raised in the same social environment by the same parents with the same story and be so different and take so different roads. And my first idea was 2 sisters, so the characters of Dunya and Mina, like the opposite way of living, of thinking, and I had these 2 characters very strong and very opposed to each other, and I started to write, and I feel I missed something, and I needed another voice, an alternative voice of these 2 roads very opposite. So I need the voice of Mourad. I need this question in the middle, you know. This is Mourad, the main character, is the voice of the middle. And this question is, can we imagine that there is a possibility to have happy life and feel free as an adult in this identity building, but not necessarily have to cut the links with our heritage. And I feel that Mourad can be the one who responds to this question, who answers this question. It's, for me, when you grow up in France as descendant of immigrants, and especially for the Algerian immigration, you have to choose. And I don't think it's the same thing in England, for example, because we don't have here, it's not, I don't know how to say it, but le communautarisme. So you have to belong to one community, it's the République. And that's all. You don't have the possibility to be yourself and be a French as you want to be a French. So you can be free, but in the French way. You have one option. You can be French citizen in one option. And I think this is very important to understand why I built this character of Mourad, which is a character, he's looking for his place. And he don't feel like to be radical, to cut with the family and the heritage and tradition. So he can be a complete French person, but he doesn't feel also to be the proud son of his parents and to reproduce this heritage with some tradition very fixed.
What I was going to say is that, funnily enough, I think these issues play out in one of the questions that I've just sent Faïza, because there's a little phrase in Discretion that I'm translating at the moment, and one of the characters has to pay an exorbitant rent of €850 a month for her studio that's 20 metres squared. But that's the price that you pay and the sacrifice that you make for living in, and Faïza's words are intramuros, so inside the inner walls of Paris. And so what that means is that you're inside the périphérique and the rent is high and it involves paying sacrifices. And Faïza, because she's always so funny and quick to quip, says, you know, living extramuros, living outside those walls and outside the périphérique, also requires sacrifices, just different ones. And what I'm asking Faïza is, do we keep that as inner Paris and outer Paris, so it's just the geography, or is there also that notion of value judgment and a one story, the kind of tyranny in Chimamanda's words, you know, the tyranny, if you like, of the one story? Is it that that's in Paris proper and that outside is in Paris improper? So it depends how much we want to play with that. But those issues and those value judgments and that the power business is always there underlying. And with Faïza, I think what's so interesting in her writing and so interesting in terms of challenging me to translate it is when you want to emphasise the dig and the inequality, and when you need to be very light touch, because otherwise the book would be, well, translating it would become treacherous because I would be over-egging the subtext. But so those issues play out there, and absolutely I think Mourad is the character who attempts to find this middle way. He has a different trajectory anyway as a male in the family and not one of the daughters, although not for the reasons that you might necessarily expect. And he's a French teacher in the French system, dealing with a school in the banlieue, but living in the 16th arrondissement and driving a Swiss car into work. So it's fantastic because he bucks expectations, and that's what Faïza always does.
To what extent did your personal experiences at school influence Mourad's experiences as a teacher at an inner-city Parisian school in Men Don't Cry?
I feel that Mourad, as a teacher for this first year of teaching in Montreuil, in Paris banlieue, was like responsible of the question of the transmission in the book. And myself, as a student of school in Paris banlieue, in Pantin, where I grew up in the middle of 90s, I can feel what, at this time, the young teachers coming from another cities of France, province, I'm still feeling how it was difficult for them to come and in these places where they completely ignore what was our conditions of living. And it's like a very violent shock. So that's the first part. I remember these young teachers at this time. And also I have a very close friend, and he was in my class for many years when I was in high school. And he, at this time when I was writing the novel, he was experienced his first year as a teacher. And he was telling me how it was to follow the formation, I don't know, the courses.
Training.
Okay. And I was so surprised to learn through his experience how the teachers, débutants, beginners, how these teachers are so... j'arrive pas à le dire en anglais, je suis désolée. Je veux dire qu'ils sont livrés à eux-mêmes. No support. Je pense que la formation pour devenir professeur est très insuffisante.
It's inadequate training to get those young teachers up to scratch. Yeah.
I was expecting, I don't know, that maybe the psychological part was important in this class to become a teacher at the IUFM. It's the Institute to form young teachers, and especially the teachers who goes to these areas and these schools, particularly because the public in these schools is specific. So you have to, it's not only theory. So this friend was at this time in his first year of teaching, and he was telling me about how he was feeling in front of his new students, these young people, and he felt all the things he learned at school disappeared totally. He has to be a new person, and it inspired me a lot. How you build like a new character to be an authoritarian person, a credible teacher in their eyes.
It's so inspiring to hear that from you, Faïza. And also, after I'd translated Men Don't Cry, and long after you wrote it, there's now this film, La Vie Scolaire.
Oh, yes.
Made by Grand Corps Malade and Medidir. And that is set in a banlieue collège. And there seems to be so much overlap. It's available on Netflix as School Life. And there seems to be so much overlap between the classroom scenes in Men Don't Cry and that film, and the language and the journeys of the teachers and the students. It made me feel very nostalgic in a way watching it, because there seems to be a lot in common. And sometimes when I was translating, I was thinking, come on, you're exaggerating. It's not going to be this non-politically correct or this challenging, is it? And then, boom, the film is saying, no, this is the real deal.
Ça me fait penser, j'aimerais ton aide, Sarah, parce que c'est un peu compliqué pour moi de l'expliquer en anglais. Mais pour moi,
so Faïza would like to say in English now, because it's a little bit complicated. Sorry, to say in French, because it's a little bit complicated to explain in English.
Ce que je voulais dire sur la question de l'expérience des nouveaux professeurs qui enseignent en banlieue, c'est aussi
So what Faïza would like to say about the experience of the new teachers who find themselves teaching in the banlieue,
c'est que finalement, certains ont moins de vécu que leurs élèves qui ont 13 ans en face d'eux. Moins de conscience de la réalité sociale qui nous frappe.
So what happens is that some of those teachers have less lived experience, less awareness of what's going on than the 13-year-olds who are sitting in front of them.
Je crois que c'est quelque chose de fondamental qu'il faut comprendre. And that's why when I talk about Boris Seguin, my teacher at this time in this workshop, I felt like it was the first time I had in front of me a teacher who can maybe understand what I was living at this time. And it was very, very important. But it's just a way to give confidence to these students. I mean, just by explaining to them that, for example, their original language, for example, Arabic for me, has the same value that the French language. That, Algerian writers or whatever, even, the stories your mother told you when you were a child, it's also, it's important as English stories or French stories. It's just that we don't have a culture more respectful. Non. Oui, mais ce que je veux dire, c'est important qu'on sente que ce que nous représentons et l'histoire que nous portons et la culture que nous avons, même si elle n'est que orale, elle est aussi importante que la culture française qui nous est enseignée à l'école de manière traditionnelle.
So it's about validation and affirmation, isn't it? And saying that your culture, even if the stories in it are oral, even if they're not written down, they are as important and deserve as much respect and place as the other stories you're learning about through French language. And I was thinking, Faïza, as well, because you're involved in La Grande Dictée, aren't you,
Yes.
at the moment, which is it's a very French thing. We wouldn't have the equivalent of that in the UK. So having to write dictations is a way of learning French, because there's all the added complications in French of accents and so on that we don't have in English, and getting up to speed with the accuracy. And you are part of this big movement where well-known writers or well-known people in French life travel to different areas, and you read out a text for young people of all different backgrounds to get their French writing up to speed. So that's a sort of it's at an angle to what we've just been talking about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it's funny sometimes when I go to these events with dictée pour tous. On dit godmother pour dire marraine. I am the godmother of this association, of this Dictée pour tous, and we traveled all around France in different areas, in different banlieues to do this dictée. And we have all different ages, social. It's very interesting to see how mixed people.
Faïza, the women in your novel are strong and eloquent. The contrasting of the mother and her very different daughters Dunia and Mina shows how they are caught between different worlds, as the Republican ideal calls on citizens to integrate and renounce ethnic, cultural and religious diversity. Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic that future generations will find a way forwards, or is each generation a lost generation?
Wow. I hope that for the next generation some issues will be resolved, and specifically the question of legitimacy.
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 I think we had experienced this quest to know, to find out how to be complete French citizen without the idea to abandon, to leave some parts of what we are, And I hope that the next generation will be focused on other things, that the question of feeling free to be what you are and not have the feeling that you are not French enough.
Are you a feminist writer?
I think I make the difference between what is it to be a feminist as a young, not so young now, but a French Algerian woman, and the French feminism, which I think is not really inclusive. For example, I question the theme of wearing a hijab now in France, and I think we can be a French woman, a Muslim woman, a free woman. And it's not very easy still today to convince these white feminists that you can be both or all the things, We have to fight these ideas that as a Muslim woman wearing a hijab, you cannot be free. Because we have this very universalist idea of what is a free person and a free woman. And sometimes the question of identity, of religion, etc. is, put on the side. You have to choose. So you have to choose between be free and be yourself. And I think we have to accept that we can be all of these things. So I feel I'm a feminist, but in my way. Je voulais dire repenser le féminisme aujourd'hui, c'est le rendre plus inclusif.
To rethink it for today in order to make it more inclusive.
Faïza, how do you feel about the allotments in Aubervilliers, Seine-Saint-Denis, being bulldozed to make way for a timber swimming pool complex for the 2024 Olympic Games? And can your mother's beloved fig tree be saved?
A few days ago, 1 week ago, the people who were fighting against this project were expulsed
Sarah, that would be banished or kicked out? Yeah, banished.
Yes, they were kicked out by police. So we don't have the hope to interrupt this absurd architectural project of this Olympic swimming pool. I'm sad to say that the popular patrimoine heritage of these gardens will be abandoned. It's not a priority for the state and the city of Aubervilliers, which is linked to this project. It's a very large project, but we are struggling for 1 year and a half. And 1 week ago, the first gardens were rasés.
Flattened,
yes.
Bulldozed.
Yes.
So the big story can't be saved. In the small story, can your mother's fig tree be saved?
Pour l'instant, les jardins sont partagés entre 2 communes, Pantin et Aubervilliers. Ceux d'Aubervilliers...
So the allotments are shared between 2 communes, Pantin and Aubervilliers.
Et les jardins d'Aubervilliers ont déjà commencé à être rasés la semaine dernière. Donc les gens qui ont des jardins...
The Aubervilliers allotments already started to be bulldozed last week.
Mais les gens qui sont à Pantin, pour l'instant, ont toujours leur parcelle de terre, mais on ne sait pas pour combien de temps.
The people in Pantin still have their allotments, but we don't know for how much longer. So your mother, Faïza, still has her allotment and the fig tree is on it. And do you have an escape plan for the fig tree? Do you have somewhere you could put it?
I don't know.
Men Don't Cry is similar to a TV sitcom. Irritations, quirky family antics and familial pettiness make for much hilarity. Everyone can relate to it. Tell us about some of the TV shows or films you have written or directed or both.
I had the chance to take part in several projects of movies for cinema and also TV shows, especially one this year, which will be titled Oussekine, like the name of Malik Oussekine, which was a French student, Algerian French student. He was the first young man beaten by police to death in 1986. And it was the first very huge police violence affair in France. And it was like something, this political event, like divided France in 2 parts. And it was the first very huge and mediatic affair about violence with police. So we've written 4 episodes for a mini show for next year in the broadcast of Disney Star for Europe. So it's a huge project and I feel very, very grateful to be part of it.
It's a huge subject and of course there are many angles and perceptions.
Le film Les Misérables was a very, very great movie to talk about the feeling of these young people in banlieue.
So it's a great film for expressing the way in which young people in the banlieue feel marginalised.
In Les Misérables, I noticed that we have a different point of view. So you have we are with the policemen, we are with the young people, and with the other references, adult references in the area. You have all these point of views as it's equal. We can understand each part of this group, of these people meeting each other every day. So policemen, young people, adults, in the same treatment. And that's the difference for us in this TV show, Oussekine. We have specifically the feeling of the family of this young man killed by the police and how they receive this drama, how they are manipulated by politics, by medias, how they deal with discredit.
With being denigrated, dénigré.
We would like to show how since 1986 and before and after, it's always the same mechanism. Je veux dire les mêmes mécaniques qui se reproduisent. It's always the same strategy from police, from politics.
The outcomes are always the same.
I think the idea might perhaps be of the same pieces of the machine that are going round.
The machine, yeah.
I think we need to have the inside voices to understand the situation in France, to understand how young people deal with all this violence every day, with racism. They are not considered as the other citizens.
Of course, the landmark film was La Haine. I mean, that was perhaps the first, if you like, film to really try and get under the skin of what was actually happening on the ground. Since then, therefore, not much has changed, really. Has there really been no change? Is that what you're saying? Depuis La Haine? Because there are scenes there with the police and also the media are not helpful, are they? Or maybe they're becoming more helpful. Maybe also the fact that writers such as yourself are really now being read and finding a readership.
Maybe I will seem to be pessimistic about that because I feel it has no change a lot. Maybe the difference between now and 20 years ago, it's like the focus is now on Islam much more than on just ethnic groups who are presented as problems in French society. We have something more, insidious. It's about how now we have, maybe in the medias or in the police also, a new feeling that these people deserve to be watched more. And because with what happened in France in 2015, what happened in Charlie Hebdo, and we now have, they feel the right to oppress.
Yes. Ils sont justifiés, justified.
Exactement. Yes. No, it's awful, but we can feel that maybe inside this population, we have maybe potential terrorists. So we have to be more tough with them. We have to be more... and even if we are violent and sometimes we can have some accidents, some bavure, as we say in French, it's just, collateral damages because we have a huge danger. Et c'est ça qui est, je trouve, difficile aujourd'hui.
Sarah, a translator is faced by singular challenges when translating literature in terms of fidelity to the original, language, the period, and the author's intentions. Faïza's writing incorporates the language of conversations that one rarely sees written in books, involving clever wordplay and hidden meaning, argot and Arabic-influenced backslang known as verlan. What is your approach? Do you carry out research on the ground?
Well, you better carry out research on the ground. That's the whole fun of translating Faïza, and it's sort of strange because Faïza is now the age that I was when I first met her, and so and I'm now 16 years older, and of course with lockdown and everything, it hasn't been possible to sit on top of an under 2 bus and tune in to all the dialogue of young peeps, but I have had a lot of collaborations over time in terms of translating the slang, and Faïza and I think there's a sort of synergy in terms of the way that we love colloquial language and we love trying to capture on the page the way that people talk as opposed to the way that conventionally they should be thought to be scribed on the page. So it's capturing that orality and getting it down, and so that someone reading it immediately hears the voice. I think that's something that fires us both up. And so in the past I've worked a lot with Live magazine in Brixton, by young people, for young people, 12 to 21-year-olds across Lambeth, Lewisham and Southwark. And Faïza and I collaborated a lot with an amazing young woman called Cleo Soazandri, who grew up in the Paris suburbs and then moved to South London, so she was bicultural, bilingual across both the slangs. So all those sorts of encounters have fed into our work. And on Men Don't Cry, I've collaborated with Rohan Ayinde, who I've sort of been turning to for slang advice since he was 13. Performance artist in his own right, photographer. So he helped me voicing the character of Mehdi in Men Don't Cry. So yeah, it's always a collaboration. It's always about translating with and not for, and finding how the different voices get into this work. And in a sense, I'm a conduit, I'm an enabler. I'm making space for those different voices to get in order to serve Faïza's voice.
And lastly, Faïza, what gives you hope? And Sarah, both of you, before you do your reading.
So in terms of what gives me hope, I mean, it's just extraordinary witnessing the journey that Faïza's been on over this period of time, this 16 years that we keep talking about, and how the world has changed in so many ways since she was starting out. And there was that danger when she started out that she was being perceived as this kid from the burbs, and that she was a one-trick pony, and she was being boxed as a kind of writer on social issues as opposed to a writer in her own right. And here we are, 6 books later, with Discretion, and we're talking about Men Don't Cry today. And it feels that Faïza is in a very different place where there is a lot more of the legitimacy that she's been articulating in our conversation today. There's a lot more recognition and confidence. And it's fascinating seeing how Cassava, the publisher for Men Don't Cry, is reaching out to all sorts of global diasporic black and brown audiences and readers and connecting with them. And that just feels a wonderful place to have arrived at in this journey that we've been on, and where there is less of the what you were talking about as a sort of patronising approach, Georgia, and less top down and more inclusive, accessible, making these books available to anybody for whom Faïza's stories resonate. And they are for everybody who's dealt with issues in their life and sat with trauma and sat with pain and likes to laugh. They're for anybody to whom that appealed.
I think the way that I see young people, and especially young women, younger than me now, I think they are more armed.
They're better armed, or have better tools, perhaps, or knowledge.
I think tools, and they are more affirmative. Je pense que la jeune génération est plus armée que nous et ont réglé beaucoup de questions.
I think the young generation is better armed, better equipped than we are, and that they have resolved more debates, more matters. They've settled more issues than we have.
Could you please finish this wonderful interview with a joint reading in French and then English that exemplifies the essence of the voice and style of Men Don't Cry?
Pour les traditionnelles vacances de juillet en Algérie, malgré les 30 kilos de bagages autorisés, on se retrouvait toujours en excédent. Chaque année, elle trimballait une tonne de cadeaux et à la pesée, elle jouait l'étonnée.
13 kilos d'excédent, c'est pas vrai? Votre balance a un problème. C'est impossible. Quand j'ai pesé mes valises à la maison, ça ne dépassait pas.
Madame, vos valises sont tellement lourdes que vous auriez pu y mettre un cadavre.
Dis-moi, mon fils, tu fais des blagues, c'est bien. Tu es algérien, toi, non?
Non, madame, je suis français.
Tu es sûr que tu n'es pas d'origine berbère? Tu ressembles à un kabyle.
C'est pas la première fois qu'on me fait ce coup-là, madame. Ça ne vous évitera pas de payer l'excédent. C'est au guichet sur votre droite, près du bureau de change.
S'il te plaît, mon garçon, tu vois, ce sont des petits cadeaux pour la famille. Des slips, des jupes, des déodorants.
Je ne peux rien faire.
L'autre fois, à ta place, c'était une jeune fille, une Marocaine. Elle nous a fait passer les valises sans payer.
C'est interdit normalement. J'obéis aux ordres.
J'obéis aux ordres, hein? Avec une mentalité pareille, je suis sûre que des gens de ta famille ont torturé des gens de ma famille.
Je suis professionnelle, madame. Je ne fais que mon travail.
C'est pas gentil. Faire payer les gens, ce n'est pas un travail, hein?
Je suis désolée, madame. Sur votre droite.
Droite? Extrême droite, oui. Raciste.
De toute façon, quiconque n'allait pas dans son sens était forcément raciste. Mon père lui fit des lui filait des coups de coude discrets. « Tais-toi, tu te crois chez le marchand de fruits et légumes ? Arrête de négocier, on va payer. Tu me fais le même cinéma chaque année. » Ma mère avait fini par abandonner, et tandis qu'on se dirigeait vers le guichet pour régler notre excédent, elle a ajouté un « Fou !» à voix basse, comme elle en avait l'habitude. Elle passait tout l'été à distribuer des cadeaux, des vêtements, des flacons de parfum, des paires de chaussures, des jouets pour les enfants, tout ce qu'elle avait pu amasser en faisant les marchés chaque week-end durant des mois. Parfois, alors qu'elle avait déjà tout donné, quelqu'un que nous n'attendions pas nous rendait visite. Affolée, elle se précipitait dans la chambre et piochait dans nos affaires personnelles. « Maman, t'as pas vu mon maillot de foot ?»
Cherche bien, il doit être dans la valise bleue. Tu parles bien du maillot de l'équipe qui perd tous ses matchs.
Maman, tu sais pas où est passée ma robe mauve ?
Tu es sûre que tu ne l'as pas laissée à Nice ? De toute façon, cette robe te rend grosse.
Où est ma chemise rayée ?
Laquelle, Abdelkader ? Elles sont toutes rayées.
Mon père lui reprochait de partir avec des valises pleines à craquer et de rentrer une main devant, une main derrière. C'était son expression.
When it came to the July rituals of our holidays to Algeria, we always ended up with excess baggage, despite the 30-kilo luggage allowance. Every year, my mother would cart along a ton of presents and then put on a show of surprise at the weigh-in.
Yeah, 13 kilos excess? I don't believe it. There's something wrong with your scales. That can be right. My suitcases weren't over when I weighted them at home.
Madame, your suitcases are so heavy you could have put a corpse in them.
So you like to make jokes, huh, my son? That's a good sign. Tell me, you're Algerian, aren't you?
No, madame, I'm French.
Are you sure you don't have Berber ancestors? You look Kabyle to me.
This isn't the first time someone's tried that approach, madame, and it won't get you out of paying the excess. You need to go to the counter on your right, by the bureau de change.
Please, my boy, look, these are just small presents for the family. Skirts, deodorants, underwear.
There's nothing I can do about it.
Last time, it was a Moroccan girl in your place, and she let our suitcases through without making us pay.
It's against the rules, I'm afraid. I'm simply obeying orders.
Simply obeying orders, eh? With an attitude like that, I bet members of your family tortured members of my family.
I'm being professional, madame. I'm just doing my job.
But it's unkind. Making people pay isn't a job.
I'm sorry, madame. To your right, please.
Right. Far right, yes. Racist.
Anyone who didn't agree with her was automatically a racist. My father nudged her with his elbow. Be quiet! Do you think you're at the fruit and veg stall? Stop haggling! Let's just pay! Why do you put us through the same song and dance every year? My mother eventually gave up, adding the habitual
Tfu
under her breath as we headed over to the office to settle our excess baggage bill. She would spend the whole summer handing out those presents: clothes, bottles of perfume, shoes, toys for the children, all the items she'd managed to stockpile from doing the markets weekend upon weekend, month after month. Sometimes, when she'd already given everything away, we'd receive a visit from an unexpected guest, prompting her to rush into the bedroom in a panic and grab something from our belongings. Maman, have you seen my football shirt?
Have another look in the blue suitcase. You're talking about the shirt for the team that loses all its matches, yeah, right?
Maman, do you know where my purple dress went?
You're sure you didn't leave it behind in Nice? Anyway, it makes you look fat.
Where's my striped shirt?
Which one, Abdelkader? They're all striped.
My father gave her a hard time for setting off with suitcases full to bursting and returning home, as he put it, without a stitch on our backs.
Thank you, Sarah. And Faïza, what a wonderful interview. So Men Don't Cry by Faïza Guène, translated by Sarah Ardizzone, is published by Cassava Republic Press and is available from online outlets such as Waterstones, Foils, Daunt Books, Hive and bookshop.org. An interview with the publisher Bibi Bakare Yusuf and a review of the novel can be read online at the Book Blast Diary. To buy Men Don't Cry from your local independent bookseller, you can find your nearest store by visiting booksellers.org.uk/bookshop search. This podcast is brought to you by Book Blast. For more bookishness between episodes, visit online journal The Book Blast Diary or find us on Twitter at Book Blast. Special thanks again to author Faïza Guène and translator Sarah Ardizzone for their time. And thank you all for listening to this episode of the Book Blast podcast.